Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're powered by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Adi Joseph, from over at For the Win on USA Today's platform coming on. We're going to talk a little bit of Kyrie Irving. We're going to talk a little bit about the comings and goings of today's NBA. First, though, I just kind of want to point out, it's shocking to me that this is probably the first time in a year I've had you on the podcast. Is that probably right, Adi?
Yeah, it's definitely probably been more than a year. I guess you just turned your back on me when I left Sporting News.
Clearly, that's what happened. I was so angry at you. It's not like we talked 3 times or 4 times a week since you left Sporting News. But no, I mean, we're both very, very busy, and it's always hard to kind of schedule these things around, my schedule and obviously your schedule, given the fact that you edit as well as write. So it's just,
Actually, we should tell people how this one came about, which was literally Sam going, "Hey, can you do an emergency podcast with me?" And me going, "Only if we can do it at this very moment."
Yes.
And Sam being like, "Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that." No, I'm sorry that the Monday podcast got delayed, folks. It's been a little bit of a crazy thing on my end. Just some stuff going on, some stuff brewing, all good news, hopefully. I needed to just randomly scramble to find someone. And I saw Adi was on GChat, and I've wanted Adi to come on the podcast for a while, obviously. And I just was like, okay, I'll try and see if he can do this podcast at some point today. And he was like, "Can you do right now?" And I was like, "Sure, that works." I don't know if a lot of people kind of know, because I certainly didn't know this because you came up a little bit before I did, but you came up doing draft work a lot more than what I think people recognize from your profile.
Yeah, my first journalism job that paid me was while I was in college at my student newspaper, the Diamondback at the University of Maryland. And then not long after that, in fall 2006, I started with NBADraft.net. And I spent 4 or 5 years, me and Jonathan Wasserman, who's now at Bleacher Report and does great work there. Both were working for Aaron Smith, and John Nichols, who's with the Bucks, I believe now, was there too. And we had a pretty nice team going on. Matt Maurer. There was a pretty good team at a time when the NBA draft was not nearly as covered by other places as it is now.
Yeah, no, and I mean, this marketplace is obviously kind of changing again because Draft Express, it was announced, is going to ESPN. We'll kind of see what their deal is. Congrats to John Gavoni and Mike Schmitz, obviously. 2 of my favorite people that I've gotten to know in the entire industry. I see Mike somewhat regularly kind of around, and then John whenever he's out in LA and kind of around this stuff. 2 of the craziest hard workers you'll find, 2 of the better people in the industry you'll find. So congrats to them. I'm interested in kind of seeing where this industry goes. It's going to be fascinating over the next couple months. Adi, let's talk about the biggest news in the NBA right now, though, because I feel like this is going to take up the majority of the podcast here, and we only have 50 more minutes or so to go. So Kyrie Irving requested a trade, I believe, it was kind of a take out the trash on Friday, news dump, it felt like, because it happened at 5 o'clock Eastern time, whenever this entire thing was released. How do you kind of feel about Kyrie Irving just deciding, "No, I'm good. I don't feel like playing with LeBron anymore"?
It's interesting. It's been read into in a lot of different ways, and I'm not sure that I necessarily believe any secondhand sourcing, even Richard Jefferson, on what exactly is the whole reasoning behind this. But it's really hard. Yeah.
Richard had a great take, by the way, too, on it, I felt.
Yeah, and I just think, I do kind of see his point, and I think that's a big part of it, but it's really hard to begrudge anyone for wanting to be ahead of the curve and getting out of Cleveland if you believe LeBron is gone. And it's also hard to begrudge Kyrie for one day thinking that he was going to be the core player for a talented young player, for a talented young team that was going to add Andrew Wiggins. And then, the next day, his whole career gets flipped upside down in the best of ways. But maybe he didn't want that to be his entire career arc. Maybe he doesn't want for his entire career to be dominated by the dude who played with Jordan. He watched, the dude who played with LeBron. He watched Scottie Pippen deal with that, and there's still people who dramatically underrate how good Scottie Pippen was. And I can't really begrudge him, especially given the fact that Dan Gilbert is kind of not a ideal boss, to put it lightly, and that it's a situation where there's so much unpredictability. You don't want to be the last guy standing on an awful roster in 2 years, and that's probably all played into Kyrie's thinking, but I don't know.
Yeah, like there's just so many different kind of rumors floating around. Like Stephen A. Smith posted or threw out an idea that Kyrie believes that LeBron is the one who leaked it, that he requested a trade. And another factor within this is Kobe Altman is he's probably 33 years old, right? Like somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
Newly minted general manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers. 8 years ago, this kid was, and he's 5 years older than I am, but he was a Southern Illinois graduate assistant. And the rise is spectacular, and everyone that you talk to around the NBA, glowing reviews for Kobe Altman as a rising personnel person in this league. But you have to wonder, if David Griffin was around, given David Griffin's reputation for dealing with egos, dealing top down with Dan Gilbert and with all of these players and all of the different kind of mentalities that these players have, you have to wonder if this thing comes out, or if it's more of a conversation instead of a trade request whenever Kyrie steps into that office with Dan Gilbert, with David Griffin involved. It's just a crazy offseason for a team that was just in the NBA Finals last year.
Yeah, there's just, I think this is at least a small part of this is directly related to the Warriors being the Warriors.
Yep.
And it's really hard for me to believe that if there wasn't this seemingly impenetrable giant that clearly the Cavs are not better than, and it's clear, it's really clear. Especially after this offseason, that I have a hard time believing that this conversation happens, much less that it's labeled a trade request. And I don't think it's been labeled by the people who are doing the original reporting on this. I don't think many have labeled it a demand. I think that it's been labeled a request or even something lighter than that for the most part, but it's still something that you definitely don't want out there about your second best player and a cornerstone guy who I think in the ideal world the Cavs would have loved to have Kyrie Irving playing his entire career there.
Yeah, when they drafted Kyrie Irving, they drafted him as a centerpiece, as you kind of laid out earlier. And when he was that guy, it did envision, there was that clip of a kid coming up on a stage asking Kyrie Irving, are you going to leave like LeBron did? And Kyrie going, no, I'm not going to leave. And that was
not like LeBron did.
Yeah, and that was 7 years ago or whatever. But it's still just fascinating to me that we've hit this point because it's such an inflection point for the franchise, right? They have to get incredible value for Kyrie Irving in one way or another. They have to either go in on this year and getting the present value that LeBron James requires to compete with Golden State, or they kind of have to go in for the future. And obviously there are some packages out there that kind of accomplish both of those goals, but they're really difficult to come up with. One, for instance, is Milwaukee. Zach Lowe posited in his piece earlier that Milwaukee could get involved with a Chris Middleton, Malcolm Brogdon, and a first-round pick, offer. And I think that's a really interesting offer. The idea, though, is that they kind of have to make a choice here. You're either going to be getting a lot more present value or you're going to be getting a lot more future value in a lot of these trades. Which kind of way do you fall on this spectrum? Do you believe they should be going for more of a future out, mentality here with the assumption that LeBron is leaving? Or should they kind of make their run now, even if LeBron is only there for one more year?
It's a really fun thing because you're not this isn't a decision Altman gets to make. This is a decision that he's going to have to read Dan Gilbert. on, and he's going to have to root LeBron on, and so he's stuck in a very difficult situation here because, one of the most common, the two most common players going to the Cavs from people who think they should just be looking for the best team they can put on the court now are Eric Bledsoe and Carmelo Anthony. We've seen a whole lot of versions of a Kyrie trade that involve those two. You don't want to trade for those two players, either of them, if you think LeBron's going to walk. Because the worst case scenario is you let LeBron leave and Rich Paul still owns your locker room. Imagine how awful that would be. I mean, Rich Paul has done a great job of building up a very specific, narrow clientele of very good players and getting them good deals and doing, I think, mostly right by them. But you never really want to let an agent run your locker room, to do it without even having a LeBron James as kind of the consolation. If they went and got Eric Bledsoe and tried to make him, Tristan Thompson, J.R. Smith, and LeBron their starting lineup, that's 4 Rich Paul players in one starting lineup, which is crazy. And then Carmelo, you're obviously only bringing him in to placate LeBron. So if you don't believe that those 2 players can keep LeBron in town, then you can't go get either of them because there's just a lot of politicking there. And there's a lot of politicking in going the opposite direction because you might just push LeBron right off your roster if you try to rebuild. And so they're working this balance. I really think a lot of it's going to come down to how important it is to Dan Gilbert to have LeBron on his team. And I don't know what the answer is because clearly he's not just giving LeBron the kind. We used to make jokes, LeBron was the real GM. LeBron was the one making all the decisions. I think clearly that's not the case.
Yeah, no, that idea was always just total bullshit to me. I've kind of espoused that many times on this podcast about how, David Griffin got vastly underrated over the years because everyone thought LeBron was the general manager. So the problem with Eric Bledsoe and Melo is that they both have 2 years left on their contract. Like, I don't think Carmelo Anthony is opting out of that last year, do you?
No. And yeah, I mean, you're just setting yourself up for LeBron leaving you with these guys you don't really want, but LeBron wanted. And it's weird. It's a weird situation.
Yeah, like, what they should probably be going for almost is finding solid contracts that have more than 2 years on them, like, a Jay Crowder like contract or a Chris Middleton like contract, like something in that range. They should be going for young players, I think.
Or 1 year.
Or 1 year contracts, right. They should either be going like further out, they should be going like with a very far out view, or they should be trying to clear their books, I think. Like, one interesting idea to me is if you can find a way to like an interesting move for both teams for me is Tristan Thompson for Carmelo Anthony in a lot of ways, because Tristan, he didn't get played off the floor in this finals, but he just had a really bad finals. You know what I mean? He was obviously integral to their first finals victory against the Golden State Warriors, and I think that's worth remembering. But if I'm in a place where LeBron James is leaving, I would want to find a way to get off of 3 years of Tristan Thompson at $54 million left on his contract. And it's at least intriguing to me to go out and try and, like, just flat out outscore the Warriors. Like, if that's going to be your goal, and given your current roster construction with Kyle Korver left for 2 more years and Kevin Love left for 2 more years and, J.R. Smith left for at least 2 more years, outscoring them is probably your best chance. It's the dumbest thing in the world probably to try and outscore the Golden State Warriors, but is that, like, it kind of feels like their best opportunity though to me, like to just try and outgun them and try and do what they did in game 4 of this NBA Finals and try and do it on a consistent basis. Am I crazy for that if they're trying to get the present value?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to build a worse version of the Rockets that also happens to have LeBron, that might be the way to go. But it's really hard to see exactly how a And by the way, Tristan Thompson is like the perfect player to put next to Kristaps Porzingis.
That's my idea. Yeah, I love it. That's what I'm thinking. Like, okay, like could you move? Is there a way that like the Knicks would be willing to do like, Tristan Thompson going there, Kyrie Irving going there? They move Ntilikina out. They move. Oh man. It gets real tricky with the Knicks giving up value, though. That's the problem. Like, they move Melo out, obviously. That's nowhere near enough. Like, you still need to find, like, Willie Hernan-Gomez's deal. And they apparently like Ron Baker a lot. Is Ron Baker untradeable for them? I don't know. They just gave him more money. They gave him the same money that Justin Holiday got, which is kind of batshit insane to me, given the fact that they were both on the same roster last year and one was pretty clearly better than the other. But like I don't even know how to get this done, but I'm just like fascinated by Tristan Thompson for Carmelo Anthony, getting Rich Paul guys kind of off the Cleveland Cavaliers if your idea is to get Rich Paul less influential in that locker room, if you're assuming that LeBron James is a goner in year one or after this year.
Right, and I think you either, like I said, look, if I were Dan Gilbert, I would have steered right into LeBron. He would have never left if I were in Dan Gilbert's shoes, because I would have basically told him, you're the best player in the world, you have the potential to be the best player ever, and we want to make sure you do that for my franchise. And I would have been perfectly fine letting him have a crazy amount of control in order to keep this guy who's printing money for me on my roster. I don't know why Dan Gilbert has such a hard time with that. But I'm not a billionaire, and I don't have the ego that comes with being a billionaire. So if I were in Dan Gilbert's shoes, this would be really simple. I'd go and I'd find the players that I'd talk to LeBron. I'd say, you want Eric Bledsoe? We can try to get you Eric Bledsoe. And the Suns are the easiest team by far to have involved in this, because the Suns are the team where any three-way trade is so much easier with the Phoenix Suns, because what's going to happen is no team is going to want to give up players who are good now to get Kyrie if they view Kyrie as an important part of what they're doing right now. Teams are not like one suggestion that I've seen a couple times is like, could the Celtics trade for him, and Isaiah Thomas being involved. And there's no way that the Celtics are going to want to trade for Kyrie and include one of their best future assets and then still risk being beaten by the Cavs. That's a horrible case scenario of like, okay, let's just say it's Isaiah and the Lakers, Kings, Sixers pick that they own, that one pick that could come from any of those three teams. The worst case scenario here is Isaiah ends up just as good or even better than Kyrie in that role next to LeBron, and you lose to them in the Eastern Conference Finals anyway, and now they have one of your best assets. That's a horrible scenario, and most teams are going to feel that way. So you're going to want to find a partner that facilitates by giving you their good player, taking the prospect from the team that gets Kyrie. That's how this trade has to work. And there's not a whole lot of ideal options other than the Suns and other than Eric Bledsoe, which is why I keep personally coming back to him as a guy who seems like the easiest one-for-one, like, here's the new point guard of the Cavs. They may not need to go in that direction. They may be able to find a couple guys or, go with like a situation where they get the exact right players from, say, the Spurs that are willing to give up enough young talent to go along with Tony Parker, and LeBron wants to play with Tony Parker. But ideal scenarios are very short here, which is why my guess is, and the best move I think right now for the Cavs is just to hold on to Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, I mean, that's another kind of aspect of this, right? Like, what do you think the odds are that they just decide, you know what, Kyrie has no power over us. He still has 2 years. He has no trade clause. We think we can convince him to stay. If LeBron leaves next year and it's his own show, next to a Kevin Love, maybe we move Kevin Love for some younger pieces and just say, Kyrie, this is your show. We're giving you everything you want. Like, what do you think the odds are that they just kind of decide that this is our plan?
That should be what they do, I think, because like you said, Kyrie doesn't have power over them. I don't think Kyrie would be very happy if that were the case. And they simply handed him a team without LeBron next year and said, "Oh, you're the star again," just like we promised, when he wasn't given that promise now. There's a lot of emotions there that need to be factored in. But the bigger point is LeBron, you could almost make this into LeBron's problem or LeBron's thing that he could help fix, which is LeBron's not going to throw away a year of his prime. Kyrie's not going to throw away a year of his prime. These two guys are not going to tank next season. That's not even a possibility.
Yeah.
So what you really are looking at here is the option to say, you two figure it out. We're going to try to surround you with other. We're going to try to add a couple more good players. Maybe Dwayne Wade gets cut after the trade deadline or something like that.
Oh, like Dwayne Wade is going to be a Cavalier.
It seems like to me that Dwayne Wade's going to be on the Cavs and Boris Diaw's going to be on the Spurs, and like I'd put a lot of money on those two things happening. But yeah, I mean, you factor in a Dwayne Wade, and suddenly some of the playmaking issues and some of the bench issues are cleared up a little bit, and they're back in the finals, and you say to them, "Look, guys, we want to keep this together. We want to keep moving forward. This is on you." And if you make it on them, it's tempting because then it turns the Cavs into not the bad guys. Now, they've got a lot of PR work because of this awful offseason for them, where their PR, they couldn't be more visibly fractured for a team that just came off 3 straight finals. But
it's a train wreck.
It's a situation where you can reassert some control if you're the team, if you just hold on to Kyrie and you say, "Kyrie, we want you to be our star if LeBron leaves. LeBron, we want you to be our star. We want you guys to play together. We want you guys to win championships. And we're doing everything we can, short of being the Warriors, to make that happen." So that's probably the safest move, but that's not the best move for the future. The best move for the future is to consistently be ahead of what's happening. And it's really tough to say that you can be ahead if you don't know what LeBron's thinking.
Okay, so let's say that LeBron comes back from Wine Tour 2017. They have like a sit down with, Kyrie, with Kobe Altman, with Dan Gilbert, with Rich Paul in all likelihood, with Jeff Wexler. Everyone gets in a room.
They all have to be in that room too. Just to be clear, this can't happen without all those people in that room.
Right.
This cannot be a conversation that happens without Dan Gilbert, and this cannot be a conversation that happens without LeBron. This can't be a conversation between agents. This has got to be a conversation with all these people sitting together, looking at each other and trying to figure out what the best path is ahead. And they have to have an open conversation, which it's always seemed like Gilbert has resisted.
Yeah, that's a great point. But let's say they have this open conversation and decide there's not a path forward for them to continue on the same team. You mentioned Phoenix as what you believe is the best trade option. So let's kind of run through some hypothetical trade scenarios with Cleveland here that I kind of find interesting, maybe that you find interesting, and we'll start with Phoenix, right? Phoenix has Eric Bledsoe. They have a lot of young players like Josh Jackson, Dragan Bender, Marquise Chris. I'm trying to think, like Tyler Ulis. A lot of guys. TJ Warren. A lot of players that could at least be interesting, and that's without even throwing in Devin Booker, where if I was Phoenix, I would rather have Kyrie than Devin Booker, but I understand why Phoenix would be concerned about the long-term just contract values of having Devin Booker for 2 more years, then an extension, whereas with Kyrie, you might only have him for 2 more years. So let's kind of think about a Phoenix deal and what that could look like. If you are the Cavaliers, what is the minimum offer that you're accepting from Phoenix?
Well, I came up with a version that involved Denver as the third team, but the basic outline was that I would want Eric Bledsoe, and I'd want at least TJ Warren, if not another wing player. And I'd want, in my 3-team deal, I also gave them Kenneth Faried. And I thought that was a pretty fair, a way to bolster up and give them some youth and athleticism and some versatility while keeping them not elite, but top 15 point guard and someone who could play with LeBron. I think Bledsoe and LeBron make sense together. I think that's a reasonable package. If you say Cleveland gives up Kyrie and gets T.J. Warren, Eric Bledsoe, Kenneth Faried.
That's at least interesting to me. If I'm trying to...
And I also should add that Cleveland's liked Kenneth Faried for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
They've been talking about him for, I think, maybe since before LeBron came back, but definitely since LeBron came back. LeBron likes Kenneth Faried.
So, an interesting idea for me is that Phoenix can not only give them value in terms of players, right? They can give Eric Bledsoe, they can give a couple of these young players, they can, maybe reroute a couple of young players to Denver or a third team to get another veteran to Cleveland. There are a lot of different ways that this, kind of framework could work, right? They can also take on some money too. Like, they're something like 10 million, 15 million under the salary cap right now, I believe.
Which is why they're the easiest team. The fact that they're under the cap, the fact that they have a lot of valuable-ish young players, the fact that they have a point guard who's in the top 15 point guards and they don't really want him, that's why they're so easy. Any deal that you want to strike for Kyrie is easier if you make the Phoenix Suns the third team, because a team like that is just super easy to trade around. You could probably come up with trades to almost any team that the Suns could make because of how many valuable assets they have.
So, like, Phoenix not only could give talent, they could also take, realistically,
Iman Shumpert.
They could take Iman Shumpert. They could take J.R. Smith's money off
Nobody's
of that.
taking J.R. Smith's money. And the Cavs don't want to give it up, I don't think. It's such a weird situation with J.R.
Yeah, like, J.R. is obviously a Rich Paul client. That complicates matters. It also complicates matters that, realistically, like you said, no one wants to take on J.R. Smith money. But, like, if that's the finalization of a deal, like, if I'm Rich Paul, I'm like, you know what? I'm getting Eric Bledsoe here. I'm getting a couple other guys here that can really help. Maybe getting J.R. Smith in Phoenix isn't a bad idea.
J.R. is fascinating. The way his contract negotiations worked, the way last season worked. What we saw with J.R. is basically here's a guy who's super valuable to the Cavs in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He was awful in the regular season, and yet they wouldn't. LeBron loves playing with him. They like having him around. And he has no value to other teams because other teams can't put him in the situation where he can win an NBA Finals game for them. So it's such a bizarre situation where I think he might be the least tradable player in the NBA. They'd have to give up major assets to get rid of JR. And I don't think that that's even something that they're going to do it as long as LeBron's on the team.
You mean top 15 all-time and made three-point field goals player J.R. Smith, that is.
Yeah.
Which is
but also
hilarious and amazing.
32-year-old who doesn't, I'm pretty sure, doesn't exercise other than playing basketball.
Yeah, that's a problem. Putting him in Scottsdale, for instance, could also be a problem. Yeah, you're probably right. It has to be Iman Shumpert. They could also take on a year of Channing Frye, but Channing Frye's an expiring contract now. That probably actually has value to Cleveland. One other thing I've talked about on this podcast before is that expiring contract value is going to be incredibly important for teams going forward again because everyone has seemingly maxed out their cap space other than Phoenix.
Shump and Frye seem like the most likely candidates used to allow Cleveland to bring back more money. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that they'd love a guy like T.J. Warren still on his rookie deal. Obviously, I think they prefer Josh Jackson, but Phoenix wouldn't want to give up Josh Jackson. But T.J. Warren, I think, would be a nice little fit there. I think he'd probably become a three-point shooter out of nowhere by playing next to LeBron. And I think he'd be a good player if they did move on past and LeBron left. He'd be a good player to have. So to me, he's a good fit too. But the Suns'
but you need more than Eric Bledsoe and T.J. Warren to trade Kyrie.
Right, and and that's where I think like a Faried and maybe a Darrell Arthur and maybe they take on Shump's contract. When you add in all those factors, then you start seeing a deal that might be worth it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And are you routing Kyrie to Denver or Phoenix? Because I can see both kind of working.
Well, I think that Denver desperately would love Kyrie Irving. He'd be the perfect fit, but for what they need. But what I had was Jamal Murray going to Phoenix then, which Phoenix would love. But it's an interesting thing because so many of the other teams that have, like the Celtics, like the Spurs, these other teams either can't offer enough or wouldn't want to offer enough because it would just negate the gains that they make. That's the problem with trading a Kyrie Irving. It's way different than trading your best player, because when you're trading your best player, you embrace a rebuild. When you're trading your second best player and your best player is the best player in the NBA, you're not really embracing a rebuild. You're trying to come up with something that passably keeps you relevant or better, or maybe even makes you better. And that's the complicating factor compared to saying trading Darren Williams, trading Carmelo Anthony, trading Kevin Love, trading Dwight Howard. Those teams, when they were moving their best player, were just saying, all right, rebuild time. And this is not that.
Is it weird that I'm kind of just saying, like, in my mind, I'm just kind of thinking, fuck this year. Like,
you can't say that with LeBron, though. You have LeBron. Unless you're going to trade LeBron, which
you're not going to trade LeBron.
Ever forgive you for.
Well, he's already said he's not going to give up his no trade clause.
No trade clause anyway. But I mean, even a scenario where you could somehow talk him into it, LeBron,
my point is, like, I don't even know if I don't think I'm talking to him about it. I'm saying, all right, I kind of think he's gone at the end of the year anyway. I'm going to try and build for the future. I don't think a LeBron team without Kyrie Irving can compete with the Golden State Warriors. So I'm punting LeBron's last year in Cleveland, which sucks, but it could create a more beneficial circumstance for us down the road. Is it weird that that's kind of my thought process?
I think fans would hate you for it because it would look like you were the reason LeBron left. And Dan Gilbert doesn't want that, and we've seen that from Dan. Dan does not want to be the villain. So I don't think that it's what Cleveland would do, and I'm not saying that that's not what Cleveland should do, because I think you're right, it does kind of make some sense. But, like, imagining, let's just say, a Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, Kenneth Faried for Kyrie Irving, and maybe a Nuggets pick. Probably not a Nuggets pick at that point, but if they traded Jamal Murray, Gary Harris, and Kenneth Faried for Kyrie Irving, that trade would work. The trade, I just checked it on the trade machine.
Probably Wilson Chandler, too.
Yeah, I mean, that would increase salaries a little bit, but you could throw in someone else. But yeah, it's like a scenario where, okay, you given the Cavs a really nice backcourt for the future. I don't know how. I think fans would be very upset, and LeBron would vocalize. That's the scariest part here, is how honest LeBron has become. So from a PR perspective and from a Dan Gilbert's ego perspective, LeBron's not going to pull punches. And if you were to trade Kyrie for Jamal Murray and Gary Harris, he'd be like, really think those guys have bright futures, but I'm trying to win now, and I don't know how that's going to work.
But at that stage, do you just kind of say publicly, do you go to war with LeBron publicly and say, like, yeah, I mean, this guy has been playing chicken with us for the last, like, year and a half. You know, he keeps signing these 1 to 2 year contracts. He's been with us 4 years now and has signed 3 contracts with us. He continues to string us along. There are obviously all of these founded rumors that he's considering playing in Los Angeles now. Like, we can't be held hostage by LeBron James. Like, ultimately, we have to decide, are we going to just fully go into bed with LeBron James, or are we going to be held hostage by him? And
that's the decision right there. That is what I was getting at. Like, with
I don't know that
any
LeBron
Bledsoe or Carmelo trade.
But the problem is like, I don't know if LeBron wants to do that anymore. Like, I don't know if he wants to just run the Cleveland Cavaliers franchise. Like, maybe he's just more interested in going to Los Angeles.
If you succumb to every one of his whims for the next year and he still leaves, then you've destroyed your franchise.
Right.
So it's a really awkward, really clumsy situation that they're in, where and yet at the same time you also know that if you rebuild this, if you turn this year into a rebuild year, you trade Kevin Love, you trade Kyrie Irving, you get really good young talent for them, and you build up the excitement for the future for a select group of fans, that you've probably cost yourself a lot of money because people will see you as the villain. And Dan Gilbert will be the villain, and the Cavs will be the villain, and LeBron has a very loyal contingent of people in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah.
Even people who burned his jersey the first time he left are now all about LeBron and view the Griffin move got such negative publicity and became such a negative thing for this franchise that they've already probably turned themselves into the villain if LeBron leaves, even if they don't make these kind of moves. But if they do, it's going to forever be that the Cavs drove LeBron out with a stupid rebuild while they had the best player in the NBA. That's going to forever be the storyline. That's not going to change. Dan Gilbert will be a villain to a lot of people in Northeast Ohio. And if you're Altman, if you're anyone in the Cavs front office, you know that. And you know that Dan's doesn't like that kind of thing. So it's a very tenuous, tight wire. It's just a really hard position to be.
God, they really backed themselves into a hole with this, didn't they?
Yeah.
Like they really, if this was a competently run organization, I feel like you could find a way to, make this situation work for you by going with future value. But you're right.
Even if the situation still came up, even if Kyrie still came to you with a trade request, even if even if Dave Griffin couldn't talk him out of wanting a trade,
mm-hmm.
I feel like this whole situation is so much easier to solve if the Griffin thing hadn't happened. Because the Griffin thing and the way LeBron publicly came out and backed Griffin, that turned Dan Gilbert into the villain. And he can't help it, and he hates it. And we know he hates it because he's written Comic Sans letters about it. So there's no questioning Dan Gilbert's ego in this whole thing and how big a role that plays.
Okay, so I'm going to throw a hypothetical kind of trade scenario out at you. The Bucks decide that they want Kyrie Irving to be their kind of like on/off ball point guard next to Giannis. They offer Chris Middleton, who, by the way, like sneaky, is probably pretty close in value to Kyrie by himself.
I've compared him to Jimmy Butler very recently.
Like he's very, very good and probably one of the most underrated players in the NBA, but doesn't have that kind of cachet. And in the playoffs, Kyrie is going to be just more valuable to you.
Yeah, remember how good he was in the playoffs?
Yeah.
Chris Middleton in 2015 against the Bulls?
Yeah, really good.
He was the only good Buck.
Really, really good. But let's say Chris Middleton, let's say Thon Maker, and let's say, you'd probably have to match salaries, so maybe you send back Delly.
Or you give him Greg Monroe because it's a one-year deal.
Or you give him Greg Monroe to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Kyrie and, X salary filler, right? So you have Chris Middleton, you replace your center with Thon Maker, who does similar things to what Tristan Thompson does. You move Tristan Thompson to New York for Carmelo Anthony, like Tristan Thompson.
Oh, that's part of this. Okay.
X for that. You now have a core of, probably Della Vedova or something like that. Chris Middleton, LeBron, Melo, everyone that's basically still on the Cavs, Kevin Love, Thon Maker, probably Iman Shumpert, I would imagine, is still on the Cavs in this scenario. Maybe Channing Frye, you move to the Bucks to kind of come closer on salaries with Monroe or something. What do you think of that kind of scenario, though? Does that give you enough future value with Melo as well as enough, or does that give you enough present value with Melo as much as enough future value with guys like Middleton and Maker?
Yeah, and I would say that the Bucks are a little bit overpaying, given how much I know they value Maker and how much I know they value Middleton, and also I personally think of Middleton. But
so who do you think has more value, Thon or Malcolm Brogdon?
Oh, I'd say Thon for sure moving forward because of his age and potential. But
I'm not going to make any age jokes.
It's a scenario where if you once again, like, to me, that's a much more competent grouping than if, say, the Nuggets tried to put together some of their young players like Gary Harris and Jamal Murray. It would be impossible for the Cavs to sell that as, oh, we didn't make our team much worse in the immediate present.
Yeah.
But it's still a situation where LeBron, you're handing power to LeBron. I don't, in terms of who gets to be the villain and who gets to when he leaves. But I think you're doing the right thing there, and I really do think if the Cavs just want to embrace a rebuild and start now, I think, yeah, go for it. To make those kinds of moves. Trade Kevin Love while you're at it, because Kevin Love has no place in that team either. It's just not something I see them doing. It's really hard for me to imagine the Cleveland Cavaliers saying, we're going to go rebuild style. We're probably not even going to win the East this year unless LeBron goes, 40-point triple-double average during the playoffs against the Celtics or whatever. And we're just going to do that, and our fans will understand in 5 years why we did it.
One of the teams that Kyrie kind of, threw out there on his, trade request, whatever you want to call it, was Minnesota. So there's obviously been a bit of discussion on Andrew Wiggins and his value vis-a-vis Kyrie Irving. To me, Andrew Wiggins is more valuable than Kyrie, just due to the team control that the Timberwolves have over him and the team control they would have over Kyrie going forward. I'm a big Andrew Wiggins guy, though. How do you feel about Wiggins vis-a-vis Kyrie?
Yeah, I've been a big Wiggins guy, too. And I think if I were the Timberwolves, I wouldn't want to give up much more than Wiggins. I saw some people throwing out that they need to give up significantly more than just Wiggins because last year Wiggins wasn't as good a player as Kyrie, which is just not how basketball works.
Yeah, like team control is so much more valuable than I think a lot of fans give it credit for.
And upside, like Andrew Wiggins is nowhere near his peak form, or he should be. If he's coached properly, he should at least become a above average defender. So, I mean, if they wanted to do Wiggins and a salary throw in for like a Gorgie Jang for Kyrie, I'd be fine with that. If I was Minnesota, I'd be happy with it. But I know if I were Minnesota, I wouldn't want to give up much more. And I'd also think they're in a weird position because their bench is so bad that they'd end up having to start a really bad player. End up having to start a Jamal Crawford or something similar to that in their starting lineup just because of how poor their bench is at the moment. But that's not a major thing. Like they can find some shooting guard. It's just a weird situation as a whole because you can't include Jeff Teague.
Yeah,
Jeff Teague can't be traded until December. So if they still had Rubio, it becomes a much easier, much more tenable trade scenario to imagine that Wiggins and Rubio become the catalyst of the package. But without that, it's a bizarre situation where they're not giving back anyone who can play point guard, and that's one of the things that
the Cavs
LeBron does not want to play point guard.
Yeah,
he's not going to. He's going to be very visibly, openly unhappy. And then they just signed Derrick Rose. I mean, are we really? Does anyone want to see Derrick Rose starting on the best team in the Eastern Conference? I mean, I would if it meant that he was.
That's not done, right?
It appears that just got confirmed.
Oh, great. I closed Twitter while we've been podcasting. So, yeah, I talked about that on the Friday podcast. That is a horrible idea to me. Derrick Rose makes 0 sense next to LeBron.
$2.1 million 1-year deal. It's fine if he's the backup, but he can't be the starting point guard on that team.
How does he help you against Golden State?
Well, there's no one left on the free agent market that does, but yeah, that's the weird thing about the Warriors is that they're just impenetrably good, and which is what I think. To go back to what I said earlier, I genuinely believe that has led to all of this. This whole off-season of unrest for the Cavs is because everyone independently realized that the Warriors were too good.
So,
which actually kind of spins into the Pau Gasol contract.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up San Antonio within the idea of Kyrie, another team that was kind of mentioned as a possibility that Kyrie brought up within this meeting. I don't see any way that San Antonio can put a package together for.
Here's the package. It's got to be Tony Parker for both salary purposes and so that the Cavs have a competent point guard right now. DeJounte Murray, Kyle Anderson, and one of their more valuable overseas stashes like Milutinovic. Am I saying that right? Milutinov. I couldn't remember. I forget how to pronounce guys who don't come over quickly enough.
Is Adam Honga officially signed yet?
I'm not sure, but you'd have to give up some
That's the guy.
major. You'd have to give up something major. Like it'd have to be, in my opinion, to make it an equitable trade, would have to be Murray and Anderson both coming over. And even then, I'd probably still want to also throw in Shumpert and Green. Shumpert and Danny Green. Just to balance that out. And I still think that the Cavs are going to feel like they're getting shorted.
They're going to get a better offer from someone for that than that.
Now would that be an interesting as hell trade of if you're the Cavs and you're sitting there and you can get Tony Parker plus the guy that the Spurs believe to be his replacement, so maybe you will too, and DeJounte Murray, you get a super versatile but probably never starter caliber, or at least good starter caliber, Kyle Anderson. And then you get Danny Green, who does literally everything that this team needs, and this team expects too much from him out of J.R. Smith. If you could then throw in Adam Honga or some other stash player that the Spurs have plenty of, the rights to them, it's an interesting trade. It's just I don't believe that that's the best deal that they'll get.
Sneaky thing with DeJounte Murray, do you know who his agent is?
It's Rich Paul.
It is Rich Paul. So that would make sense. That's an interesting, kind of idea there. I personally, I'm not a huge DeJounte Murray guy. I think he's fine. Don't get me wrong, but he's not the guy that I want as the centerpiece, the young centerpiece of a Kyrie Irving trade.
It actually comes right back to this Pau deal again, because I've always kind of been of the mind that I'll trust Greg Popovich and R.C. Buford to run their team. And so if I don't believe DeJounte Murray's that great, I might not believe he's going to be that great on another team. But the Spurs, if they are really believing that he's their future point guard, it kind of makes me buy into him a little more.
Yeah, am I wrong?
But only for them. You take a Spur fit out of San Antonio, and sometimes it goes wrong. Sometimes it's George Hill, and it turns out that the Spurs just were the ones who really recognized how good this guy could be. But other times it just goes wrong, and we've seen that happen a bunch, and I think that is a not unlikely scenario for Jonathan Simmons in Orlando.
Yeah, that's a really good person to bring up as well. The Pau Gasol deal, 3 years, $48 million, partial guarantee on year 3. That contract looks awful to me.
Awful.
There's not really another way to put it.
It's better than Ian Mahinmi or Joakim Noah, but only because they're getting paid more.
Yeah, and their deals were 4 years instead of 3.
Right. Well, I'm talking about what's going ahead for them. Noah, I'd rather have Pau at those numbers than Joakim at those numbers for the next 3 years, but not by a lot.
Yeah, Pau is ostensibly better than Noah, but
only because of health.
Only because of health, probably. Yeah, Jan Mahinmi again. Jan Mahinmi might be better than Pau Gasol at this stage. It's pretty close.
Only because of health.
But again, only because of health would you rather have Pau Gasol, because he's at least going to give you some sort of production. Yeah, they're eating into their cap space for next year for Pau Gasol. I can't get behind this deal.
Their cap space for the future.
Yeah, very strong. Do we know what the partial is yet?
I don't believe that's been reported. I haven't seen that. But.
Yeah, if the partial is even $5 million, you're giving
it's a weird
$37 million
move.
for 2 years of Pau.
It kind of almost feels like a Spurs branding moment. The Spurs are international basketball's favorite team, and now they've got Spain. I don't know. It's a very strange move. Maybe they thought it was Mark.
Maybe they thought it was Mark.
Pop went the whole season thinking he was coaching Mark.
Oh my god.
But yeah, it's an odd move. But again, when it comes to what the Spurs do and how the Spurs spur, I don't tend to question it as much. And I've seen some weird sort of Spurs backlash where people have actually suggested the Spurs are playoff underachievers, which is insane. I mean, yes, it's a 67-win team underachieved in the postseason. But other than that...
The fact that they won 61 games this year is insane. That's an overachieving regular season team.
And on top of that, easily made the Western Conference Finals and put the biggest scare the Warriors have ever had all season into them.
Yeah, crazy to me. Absolutely.
So the Spurs are clear cut. Like, this is still an A-plus run organization that still knows how to win playoff games, even with players who we don't think are good in the playoffs. Like, that's been one of the criticisms of Powell. What does he do in the playoffs? He can't defend anyone. Well, the Spurs made it work, and they almost took Game 1 from the Warriors, which is an amazing thing in Oracle in the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
If Kawhi Leonard doesn't get hurt, they win Game 1, maybe they have a championship. Like, it's not out of the question. So any thought that, for me, I keep saying to myself, like, it's the Spurs. It doesn't have to make sense to me sometimes.
Yeah.
And they've proven me wrong on they bought in Patty Mills instead of Corey Joseph, and I thought that was a mistake. I thought Corey Joseph, clearly a better player than Patty Mills. Corey's a good player, but Patty Mills has been the best backup point guard in the league.
Yep.
And, that's just a classic Spurs. Here's a guy who we believe in, who fits our system, who knows exactly what we want him to do, and that's why we're buying him.
Let's finish this thing up on Kyrie. I'm just going to run through all 30 teams very quickly and say, what I think the chances are in any capacity. So I'm going to start from the bottom up. The Washington Wizards, 0%. John Wall is there. Bradley Beal's there. They're fine. The Utah Jazz, they have some interesting pieces to me, but I don't really think that would strike me as a Jazz move. Do you kind of agree with that?
It would be a perfect fit for what their biggest weaknesses are, though.
It would be.
If you could pair a Kyrie, Ingles if you could pair those two guys in your backcourt, and then it would work really well. But I don't think that this is a Jazz move, and it doesn't seem like they would take Kyrie, worried that he might leave in 2 years when they've clearly got such a forward-thinking front office. Sorry, we spent too long on the Jazz.
I was going to say, could your idea of a trade be like one of Exum or Mitchell, Rodney Hood maybe, and a couple of picks? Like that's your best.
Just to balance out the salaries.
And who?
And Derek Favors, which is a big ad, but you got to balance out the salaries, and he's the guy that the Cleveland would want. So that would be roughly what it would be, and I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, it's interesting to me though. Toronto, Kyle Lowry, maxed out salary wise, probably no. We talked about San Antonio. The Sacramento Kings have said that they're not really interested in dealing De'Aaron Fox for Kyrie Irving, so that's kind of the end of the conversation for me, right?
Yeah.
Portland has CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. Not really all that interesting. We've talked ad nauseum about Phoenix.
What if they came up with a way to trade all of their other pieces for Kyrie and just had those three?
It'd be amazing. I would love that so much, but it's not going to happen.
Anyway, yeah.
Phoenix, we've talked about ad nauseum. Philadelphia has Markelle Fultz, I think that they're probably going to kind of just see what they have here, right? Don't you agree?
And Fultz would have to be that's not fair. The Sixers have three guys. One of those three guys has to be in this trade. It would probably be Fultz. It's definitely not going to be.
I would imagine it would probably actually be Ben Simmons, given the Rich Paul connection.
Possibly, but I think if I was the Cavs, I would want Fultz to be the guy.
Yeah. Regardless, though, I think Philly's going to want to see what they have. Orlando is fascinating to me. I think they could actually make a very competitive offer if they wanted to. You could say Elfrid Payton, Aaron Gordon.
Who had a great second half.
Yeah, like Elfrid Payton, Aaron Gordon. They have guys like
that Kyrie
Fournier and
supposedly
Terrence
might
Ross.
want.
Yeah, they actually have the pieces to me to get this deal done, don't you think?
It just wouldn't make them a playoff team, I don't think. I think if they gave up those pieces, they wouldn't be a playoff team anyway. So, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to Orlando. I think it's probably the easiest. It's probably the easiest team to make a 1-for-1, like a team, 2-team deal work.
Jonathan Isaac is there, obviously. They can kind of figure out some way to match salaries with centers, even. Get Nikola Vucevic there, get a couple of other guys. That's kind of a sneaky one for me that I think makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, Oklahoma City, Russell Westbrook. I don't really think that makes sense. The New York Knicks, we haven't talked a ton about the Knicks as a primary destination for Kyrie yet.
I wouldn't want anything they have.
I don't really think that it makes sense in a lot of ways.
I mean, unless they're going to give up Porzingis. Like, I love Ntilikina. I was higher on him than you were and pretty much anyone else other than a couple front offices were. But I just don't think I would want anything from the Knicks for Kyrie.
It'd have to be a 3-team deal involving Ntilikina and Carmelo Anthony. Ntilikina being routed to a third.
I don't even know when's their next pick that they can trade. It's not. Is it 2021 or is it 2020? I don't remember.
No, I think it's they're pretty set now with picks, aren't they?
Oh, really? Okay, maybe I was evaluating that aspect then. But yeah,
I think they're okay with picks. So
also wouldn't be a playoff team.
Agreed, but you'd have a Porzingis, Irving core to build around, and I think Kyrie would probably re-sign there.
Yeah.
The Pelicans, that's a thing that Zach Lowe has been stating is like an interesting destination. I personally don't really see the fit. It would have to be DeMarcus Cousins for Kyrie, and I don't really love that.
No. And can they trade Drew Holiday? I know he just re-signed, but he re-signed it. I don't. Yeah, they can't until December, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
No.
Minnesota, Milwaukee, we've talked about, pretty heavily. Miami has some pieces, but doesn't have the picks. Like, it would essentially have to be just Justice Winslow.
The next first rounder they can trade is 2023.
That's right. Yes.
That I know I'm right on.
That's 100% correct. So, it would have to be Goran Dragic, Justice Winslow, and Bam Adebayo. That would have to be your package almost.
I would do that probably. I would at least consider it if Justice hadn't been hurt most of last year. That would be a lot easier to sell me on. But I like those three players, so that would be an interesting one.
That's a tricky one for me because I feel like I'm a little bit down on Justice compared to what the rest of the basketball intelligentsia is because I don't think he's ever really going to shoot it.
No, but he's a playmaker, I think so. Anyway,
yeah,
Memphis, Miami's interesting.
Miami's interesting for sure. I agree. Memphis, no, I don't really see that. Mike Conley's still under. I'd
rather have Conley.
Yeah, they have some salary
That's
issues.
enough for me. If I'm the Grizzlies, I'm not trading Conley for Kyrie straight up. So that ends the discussion.
That's true. The Lakers, no. I mean, you have Lonzo Ball now. I think that Kyrie and Lonzo would be an excellent fit together. You'd essentially be trading Brandon Ingram and what for this?
The Lakers are holding their salary cap space, and that's clear.
Yeah.
So they have big plans, and they're bigger than Kyrie Irving. And
agreed.
I don't necessarily think that's a smart way to operate, and it's burned the Lakers in the past, but that's the bottom line
That's their plan, at least. The Los Angeles Clippers, I mean, it'd have to involve DeAndre Jordan.
It'd have to involve DeAndre Jordan and probably Patrick Beverly and some. I don't even know. It would be interesting though. I'd pay to see a Blake Griffin, Kyrie Irving pairing. That'd be a fun pairing on a pick and roll.
Who would you rather have, DeAndre Jordan or Kyrie?
For sure Kyrie, because I don't really buy into paying your center crazy amounts of money.
That's true, and you have DeAndre for one more year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, DeAndre's been I feel like this is the most underreported fact in the NBA. DeAndre Jordan has been 3 straight years all NBA.
Yep.
It's unbelievable. In a vacuum, I would probably rather have DeAndre, but I understand your point about not wanting to pay centers.
Unless it's Nikola Jokic.
Yeah. But underrated, DeAndre is probably better than Jokic right now.
Maybe at the moment, at least.
Yeah, at the moment, Jokic is 22, but still.
Yeah.
Indiana Pacers, that's just a hard no. They don't have enough to give up, and they
Miles Turner I mean, I guess they could if they wanted to cut their future for Kyrie. I mean,
there's just no reason. There's just no reason. The Houston Rockets have one of the best backcourts in history, in my opinion. There's no way that they're getting involved in this. The Golden State Warriors, the Cavs are not trading with Golden State. Detroit, I don't see anything that the Cavs would want, to be honest. Like, I don't want Andre Drummond as the centerpiece in a deal like this. Avery Bradley and like Luke Kennard, I don't really see that fit. Do you?
No, I don't think the Pistons have anywhere, unless they gave away they pulled a Nets and gave away 3 first rounders.
Yeah,
with light or no protection. But no.
Yeah. Denver, we've talked a little bit about them. I find them to be an interesting fit. I don't know that we need to kind of go further into them though. Dallas, intriguing on a few levels to me. You could use Wes Matthews as an interesting salary matcher who could help you against the Golden State Warriors. You could throw in Dennis Smith if you're interested in Kyrie versus Dennis Smith. Like if you just kind of evaluate Kyrie as a much better asset than Dennis, I can see that.
You only do that if you think that Dennis Smith is not. You only do that if you think that Dennis Smith is definitely not going to be better than Kyrie. Like definitely not going to be better than Kyrie. And I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about the peak of Dennis Smith's career. Definitely not better than Kyrie. And I don't know. I think that the Mavericks are pretty high on him. So
yeah,
I don't see that.
I mean, the question is do you want to? How much do you value the end of Dirk's career? Right. Like that'd be the key. But
they've already proven the answer to that is not.
Yeah, I just don't think you can. I agree. The Cleveland Cavaliers is the team that we're talking about. Chicago Bulls.
I think there's a very good chance that they keep him for next season, though. So that's worth saying.
That is worth saying. That's an interesting idea to me, too. The Chicago Bulls, no. Again, just
he's not bad enough for them to trade for him.
I don't really.
They only like mediocre point guards.
Yeah, I don't understand that at all. The Charlotte Hornets.
I saw some people. I've seen some people talking about this, like they would give up Kemba and one of their other starters and some future asset for him. I don't know. I honestly have no read on whether they'd consider that. I know that they love Kemba. I think Kemba's probably a better defender than Kyrie, but Kyrie definitely is a player you could probably do more. It's a weird situation. I think there's a chance that they could be in this mix.
So, like Kemba though is getting paid $24 million over the course of the next 2 years. That's a better value than what Kyrie's bringing you over the course of the next 2 years. So, like,
but if you want to get rid of Batum anyway, because you realize like he might be about to hit a wall, which he might be about to hit a wall, then maybe you can throw him into this deal as a player who LeBron would. Batum would be a lot better on a real contender than on a team that expects a lot from him.
I think I agree with that. That's an interesting dark horse that we probably didn't spend enough time on, but we kind of have to get out of here soon.
Yep.
Brooklyn, interesting to me at the very least. Like you could throw together if you wanted to a D'Angelo Russell, Jeremy Lin kind of like package. I'm gonna say no because I don't think they can.
No.
I don't think they can get enough of it, but probably not.
No, not without a draft pick. Yeah. I mean, they could throw their 2020 pick in, but
is that enough?
No.
Yeah. Boston, we've kind of talked about them. I don't really think that they can make this trade. It's too risky on both teams' behalfs, being the top two teams in the East, right?
Right. The worst case scenario to either one of them is that they lose to the other one in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
And that their trade made that happen, so they're not going to do it.
Yeah. The Atlanta Hawks is a final option here. I'm going to say no. I don't know. I don't think that fits what they're doing. They've dismantled their team. You could probably do a pretty interesting, them as a third team option, right? Like
where Schroeder goes to the Cavs, if that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah, and they have some young pieces that another team could want if they're trading a veteran to the Cavaliers.
But the rookie that we all, at least I think you and I both think very highly of, was the 19th pick in the draft, which indicates that other teams aren't jumping all over themselves to get John Collins.
Right,
And
like John Collins is interesting to me. Taurean Prince is probably their most valuable young player right now.
Yeah, but I don't get the sense the teams are jumping all over themselves to get him, so I don't think they'd overvalue him. I think the Hawks are probably out of it. And I think that probably sums it up, is that there's maybe 5 teams out there that it's really worth talking about a Kyrie trade with. And I still think that ultimately he'll start the season in Cleveland, or at least we won't see a trade until closer to the season, even if we do see a trade.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. I do not envy Kobe Altman on this scenario. I know that he is a 33-year-old.
Welcome to the job, kid.
Yeah, like a 30-something-year-old general manager, and that's fucking incredible. But this is not the scenario you want to be thrown to the fire on, right? Like, you do not want to have to deal with, having to trade Kyrie Irving 5 days into your job.
Yeah.
Adi, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people where they can find you on social media. Anything else that you want to plug, man, please be my guest.
Yeah, I want to. You can find me at For the Win, ftw.usatoday.com, and at USA Today, where I did cover the draft this year. And on Twitter at Adi Joseph, on Facebook, Adi Joseph NBA. But I'm sure you're probably finding this podcast either through Sam's subscription or Twitter, and you probably already know that. So, thanks for listening.
Adi did a sneaky fucking awesome job covering the draft this year. This is like the first year that you've covered the draft in like 3 or 4 years, right?
Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah, so he did an awesome job. I would suggest everyone follows him. I'm extremely disappointed we didn't get a chance to talk about Maryland on this podcast. Fascinating team coming up this year. Adi, as he said at the top, is a graduate. I'll have him on eventually at some point to talk about the Maryland
the real Justin Jackson.
The real Justin Jackson.
The better Justin Jackson, the one who's
I don't know about that. Let's ease up on that. We're going to have an argument, I'm sure, about that on this podcast at some point. But at least the more intriguing Justin Jackson, maybe, given some of his dimensions. But yeah, we'll have Adi on again to talk about that. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the show on iTunes. You can get us on SoundCloud, Google Play, Android, whatever podcasting platform that you use. I'm sure we're up there right now. Please, guys, continue to listen. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we'll be back on Wednesday with something interesting again. Hopefully some more basketball news breaks, because good fucking Lord, we're coming down to it here on this show, as we proved last Friday. So until next time, we will talk soon.